All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Jam Room Podcast, hosted by Sam and Illia. Thanks to the Jam Room for having us once again. We got the one and only Brendan Bull with us here today. Brendan, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing well. I really appreciate y'all having me, man.
Of course. Brendan, why don't you just tell us a little bit about, like, your story with music? Like, you know, how you got started, like how you got into the professional drummer thing, like kind of some of that stuff.
Yeah, man. I mean, playing drums is something that I've really always wanted to do. I grew up in a really supportive and musical family. My mother and father had an incredible record collection, and so I was exposed to a lot of different things. My dad's a guitar player. He loved flat picking, playing the blues. Grew up listening to a lot of Allman Brothers and things like that. My mother loves soul and R&B and classical ballet. So I mean, I was listening and exposed to like everything, and I was that, you know, stereotypical music geek kid that, you know, after school would go home and like lock myself in my room and, you know, just listen to music instead of doing homework and just literally memorize like everything that was happening on the record, note for note, who all the musicians were, like where it was recorded, like all that stuff. I mean, I was always obsessed. My mother was actually a self-taught drummer herself. She played drum set in high school, just, you know, sort of in the closet, and her drum set was the first drums that I ever played. She taught me my first beat, which was Everyday People by Sly and the Family Stone, and to this day, still one of my favorite songs. And from there, I started taking private drum lessons with Matthew Jones. I came up through the middle school and high school band programs, did marching band in high school and college, was lucky enough to study under Jim Hall and Dr. Scott Herring at the University of South Carolina, and I ended up getting a music degree in percussion and jazz studies, and played around town for a few years, saved up my money with a lot of different bands, met a lot of great people. I ended up moving to New Orleans for 5 years. So I was down the bayou, and just honing my craft, seeing if I could do it in another city. Made some networks down there, started recording and touring more, and moved back to South Carolina right before COVID, actually. And then at some point down on Main Street, I met these two charming young musicians named Sam and Illia, and eventually they asked me to come and join their podcast, and here I am today. So.
Well, we're happy you're here, man. Very cool. Man, describe like some similarities and some differences about the Columbia music scene and the New Orleans music scene.
Mm-hmm. Man, you know, the first thing that obviously comes to mind is the fact that I don't think that there is another city in the entire world that would compare to New Orleans. It is a melting pot in the truest sense of the word, which makes it uniquely American. You know, it's obviously the birthplace of jazz, which is America's music, and so many things stemmed from jazz and that creative art form. You know, coming from the blues and, you know, molding itself into rock and pop and funk, and the birth of the backbeat itself. I mean, that in itself is very historical. But, you know, at the same time, like, being able to have those experiences down there, and meet so many musicians, and be able to connect with different people all over the country and the world, that makes places like Columbia that much better, too. Maybe you could argue that Columbia's music scene is a little bit smaller than a place like New Orleans. You know, the culture is a little bit different. The musicians are a little bit different, but that's kind of the beautiful thing about different scenes, in my opinion, is that the scene in Columbia is not like the scene in New Orleans. It's not like Nashville. It's not like New York or Chicago or LA or Austin. You know, it has its very own unique thing. And I'm actually really, really proud to be a part of the Columbia scene, because there's some really, really talented people here that are trying to do some really, really unique and creative things. And the bottom line, at the end of the day, that's what we as musicians want to do, is to be artistic and creative and hang out with like-minded people. And, you know, man, if you can do it in Columbia, I'm a testament, man. If you can do it here in Columbia, you can do it anywhere in the world. And if you can do it anywhere in the world, you can do it here in Columbia, too.
Man, I love that.
It's pretty deep, right?
Yeah. Processing. That's a very interesting thing to say, for sure.
Yeah, because everyone thinks about, like going somewhere else, like going to another scene. It's like, oh, do you like outgrow Columbia? I think is kind of sometimes the mindset.
Sure.
I don't know. I feel like that's kind of I don't want to say reductive or something, but it's like, I don't know. I think there's lots of amazing things to be doing in this scene, but that's also a really interesting perspective that like, if you can do it here, you can do it somewhere else too.
To elaborate on it even more, I would say that it's a bit of an outdated mentality in the sense that it's like, way back in the day, like, turn of the century or something, golden age of Hollywood or recording music and things like that. Everybody was like, if you don't go to LA or if you don't go to New York, like, you're not going to make it, whatever making it would be. And I simply don't think that's the case anymore. I mean, there is a ton of there's so many opportunities now for musicians, between like, recording and gaining followers and subscribers on like social media, or tracking at home in your home studio, and like being able to network with people online versus in person. Those are things that have completely changed the game. You have you have Instagram and TikTok stars now that are musicians that, it's like everything's always been. Some of them are really good, some of them are kind of not so good, but it all depends on what you want to do. And I definitely firmly believe that you can totally do it here in Columbia. I'm a full-time working musician in Columbia, South Carolina. What else needs to be said? Yeah. You can do it if you put your mind to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, but like you're a drummer, and so you like all that sort of share of the gigs for like solos and duos. Like you're just playing band gigs essentially, and you're still doing it. So like that's a huge testament to like you really can do it.
Dude, 100%, man. And you have to be I will say, like, it all depends on, we talked about this before, like, it depends on what you want to do. It depends on what you want to do with your career. I was lucky enough to be guided by some really incredible teachers and some private instructors in the field of drums and percussion. And the one common denominator between all of them is the fact that it's like, if you really want to do this, you have to be versatile. In my world, being a drummer and a percussionist, that usually entails being very proficient in different styles. Being able to play jazz music proficiently, being able to learn a whole set list of original songs, being able to sight read, even like a musical theater gig or something like that. And being able to sort of be a chameleon and meld in with a bunch of different bands and situations, and being able to play a big arena versus playing a small coffee shop. Like, it's as Dave King of the Bad Plus would say, that's how you get the gig.
You're a very versatile drummer. Like, we've had you personally like play a bunch of different styles, and I'm like, I don't know, when we have certain gigs where we know that we're going to play a bunch of variety, we're like, oh, well, Brendan would be great. Because you can do all of it.
Well, that's very, very kind. And, that's, again, to elaborate on that, it's one of those things where you sort of have to be. I think that especially, well, you guys know when you hire a drummer or when you hire any musician, but especially a drummer, it's like, you want to be able to... you want to be confident in your band and your musicians, and you want to be able to. I don't know. I guess my approach to playing drums, not just for myself, but in support of the band. It's like I want to be the warm blanket that everybody can cozy up in. Mm-hmm. And then if it gets too hot, you can rip the blanket off and just go to town. It's I think it's important to make everybody around you feel very comfortable. So that's what I consider one of the top priorities of my job to be.
Oh, man.
That's very important, yeah.
Yeah, I've never thought of it like that, but you definitely do a great job of that. Like, I've noticed, like, when we're on stage together, I'm like, I like the groove is just, it feels right, and everyone's, like, having a good time, and, like,
we're so supported, yeah.
Each other, like, yeah. And
that's the goal, man.
Yeah. And that's such an important part of, like, doing a good job as a bandmate. Yeah, it's just, like, making the people around you, like, feel confident and feel, like, supported. Yeah, I love that, man.
it's just like we're having this conversation right now. You know, we're all bouncing off of each other. You know, we're listening to each other. We're responding to each other, you know, I would say in a proper way. You know, you're not interrupting per se. Like, you're not, like, this isn't, like, you guys are hosting this and having me as a guest, but it's not necessarily about me. It's about, you know, the bigger picture when it comes to all of these questions. And that's exactly the same mentality that I always want to have when it comes to playing drums in any sort of musical situation. You know, it's you always strive to be one big happy family. Everybody gets their point, their time to shine. Everybody can come together and create, you know, an amazing sound in unison together. You know, there's a term that I learned a long time ago, actually, when I was in high school, and I made. I was the timpanist in the National Honor Band of America. How do you like that? Ooh, far fly from playing some rock drums in the studio at the Jam Room, I can tell you that right now. But I went up to Indianapolis to be in this in the National Honor Band of America. I auditioned for it. I mean, it was like, you know, again, man, I was just doing everything that I could as far as drums and music and all of that stuff when I was obsessed. But I'll never forget the band director talked about this term, and the term is gestalt. And what gestalt means is the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That's worth repeating. Gestalt. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I didn't mean to get so close to the microphone when I was saying that, but that just stuck with me, man. Like, that really, really hit home with me, because it was like, dude, this isn't about how many chops I have. This isn't about the loudest and fastest solo that I can play, or anybody in the band for that matter. Like, those can be amazing moments, but coupled with the amazing moments of the unification of the band and the sound, like, that's what pops. That's what people remember too. You know, I mean, you can play an amazing drum solo and people will remember that too, but ultimately my overall goal will always be for somebody to walk away being like, that band sounded fucking phenomenal.
Yeah. That's true. You could all be individually fantastic musicians, but if you can't play fantastically together, then, like, what's the point, really? It's kind of,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. We've been trying to, like, work on that just in our own, like, in the Sam and Illia band stuff, is taking, like, the word jam and like making it more like playing off of each other, improvising, and like sort of finding these ideas together instead of just like trading solos, you know?
Oh, totally.
I think that's a really, like, fun sort of, like, progressive, interesting way to think about, like, that concept as a band. But man,
100%, man. The fun can also totally be in the simplicity of it too. Like, sometimes, not to sound contradictory, but sometimes the gigs are different. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to play. I mean, when you guys play duo in maybe a small restaurant or a small coffee shop, or even a small listening room, that's probably going to be a completely different vibe than when you guys are hosting one of your open jam nights, or when you're playing, you know, a show. For a corporate event or something, or a big show at the Joint or New Brookline or something. Like, it's totally different mentality, but you can still hone in on those simple aspects and the unifying sound of the group, however big or small it may be. So
yeah,
I think that's important too, just being able to listen and vibe out for what is best for that particular musical situation.
Man, awesome. Okay, so switching gears a little bit. So I want to hear, like, I have sort of two questions that I want you to answer. So the first question is, Brendan Bull, sort of like where you are right now in your, like, career as a musician. What's your thought process for accepting or declining a gig? Like, what do you look for? What do you try to avoid? But then also, what kind of thought process would you encourage, like, sort of a fresher, newer musician that's just trying to, like, you know, get more experience? Like, how would you encourage them to think about that process?
Getting into the business side of things now. We were conceptual, now we're honing it in on the business side. Okay. I mean, that's honestly, literally and figuratively, probably the $1 million question, right? Because if you're going to do this for a living, you have to figure out how to do it for a living. Let me start, I guess, at the beginning, like where I am now, at least. So I've, after telling you sort of my background and my life story, like it brought me up to right here, right? And so I've, over the course of that time, I've been really fortunate enough to amass a really solid network of musicians and players and artists that I can count on not only to hire me, but to collaborate with. And so it's like I'm never really worried, in a nutshell, I'm not really ever worried about having to work because I've amassed a network, a group of people that I trust to work with and that they trust me to work with. And I think that is one of the biggest goals. Like I said, lots of musicians and artists. I want to come back to that too. The difference between an artist and a musician. I don't mean to get off topic, but that just came into my head too. But I definitely think that the best thing that you can do is build a working relationship with the people that you are currently playing with. Don't burn any bridges. Show up prepared. Show up on time. Maybe we can all do a little bit better job of that sometimes. Show up prepared. Show up on time. It's a given that you need to know how to play your instrument. And again, be as versatile as possible so that you can be hired back. I don't just play jazz. There's a lot of people that might know me from the jazz scene or the jazz world, and they see me playing with Sam and Illia, or they see me playing with like Stankface or Stagbriar, some original bands, or they see me out on tour with Mike Dillon, and they're like, "Bro, I had no idea that you played jazz." Conversely, if they see me out on tour playing some punk rock with Mike Dillon, they're like, "Bro," and then they see me at the club, at the joint on Main Street or something playing jazz. They're like, "Bro, I had no idea you played punk," or and it's like, to me, it's all one and the same. Being versatile and being creative within those realms, it's going to get you more work. If somebody calls me for a musical theater gig, I am fortunate to I have the ability to sight read. I have the ability to read music. I have the ability to follow, a conductor or a director. So that world is also open for me to make money. We're talking about making money right now, as far as that goes.
Sure.
So I think that building your network, not burning any bridges, only to reiterate all of that, making sure that you have some good quality gear that sounds good. That almost takes a back step, though, to, being responsible, dressing appropriately for a gig. I mean, there's so many different there's so many different things. Let me ask y'all. Let me turn the tables and interview y'all. I mean, so what would when you guys are hiring a band for any one particular gig, what would be something that might turn you off to working with somebody? Like maybe, give me something good and then give me something bad.
Okay. Okay, so good. I'm going to use my boy Chris Phelps. Shout out, Chris, if you're listening.
Hey, that's my old student.
Man. Yeah. In the Brendan Bull School of Drumming. Something we love about Chris is that we have hired him to play like Jake's before, where we're all like in-ear monitors and like playing loud amps on stage, like we're rocking. It's like meant to be like a big college bar, and like Chris can like lay into it and like do these rock drums great. But then also like we have Chris Phelps play like a little broken down drum kit at like Hall's Chop House, and it's like I feel like when I don't really know because I'm not a drummer, but I would imagine like when you're first coming up on drums, it's like, oh, I'm gonna play loud because like this is like
it's a big loud instrument, man.
Yeah, which it is, yeah, absolutely.
Don't need no amps, man.
Yeah. But Chris can like sit there in halls next to a massive piano that we've shoved against the wall, and like he can play at a volume that works at Hall Trap House, which like that blows my mind. I don't know how he does that, but he makes it sound great, and the grooves he plays are like so tight and still feel good despite playing like just the perfect volume. And like that's a good thing. Like shout out Chris, you're the man. We love that guy.
I'll sit right next to a cymbal and I'll be like completely fine the whole evening.
Yeah,
like
it's remarkable.
That's what we like. That's what we like, and that's the name of the game. That's the name of the game.
Versatility, like you were saying.
Yeah. But yeah, like you said good and bad. Do you want to do any of the bad? I have one in my mind. I can.
Well, I immediately thought of like not learning songs because I know that that's like a huge thing that you and I have talked about before. We're like, because we'll sometimes ask our band to play some like complicated sections and everything. And it is like important to us that like you really listen to those and you like listen to our notes and you know that, I mean, we hire different bands for different gigs all the time. So we need someone who's able to just kind of like work with us a little bit. We don't want to give any band like too much to do. But I don't know. That's what I was thinking, trying to read your mind, Sam. Was
So let me elaborate again on that. So I would be willing to bet on in like the most basic way that if you guys played a gig with one drummer, we'll talk about drummers. If you play one gig with one drummer and he shows up, maybe he's got a, you know, let's say he's got a good feel. He was on time. He was dressed appropriately for the gig. I mean, in other words, like if it's an outdoor brewery, you know, he didn't necessarily show up wearing a tuxedo, and vice versa. If it was at the small jazz club, like he didn't show up wearing some ripped up jeans. You know what I mean? Small little things like that, you know. He knew all of the songs. Maybe not everything was perfect, but maybe he had some charts. And you know, he was listening and communicating with everybody. Versus a guy that showed up, you know, maybe he was a little bit late. Maybe he was playing too loud. You know, maybe he was just plowing through all the songs or something like that. I don't know. Two totally opposite end scenarios for sure. Maybe they're both like super nice guys and good players in their own right, but I'd be willing to bet that you would probably be calling drummer 1 again for another gig versus drummer 2. Yeah.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah. But even on the kind of the flip side of that, it's like you could show up and do everything like exactly right. You could be dressed right. You could know all the songs perfectly, you know, everything. And then you can just be like not the coolest person in the world. And it's like, I don't know, do we want to work with that person or do we want to work with someone who like maybe doesn't hit everything perfectly, but like is really fun to be around?
And Illia hits it square on the head because there's so many factors and so many variables involved, you know? Like that's very true too. Yeah. That is very true too.
I would say go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that cooler person is also like pretty willing to work with you and is like, you know, will probably be the first person to come and be like, oh, I missed this mark on this song or whatever. But I'll make sure I get it down next time or something like that, you know, like
you say, somebody that you're vibing with, willing to work, willing to, you know, that's the other thing. I think we all realize, I know that I have realized over the course of over the time, everybody's at different stages of the game. Everybody's at different levels, different rungs of the ladder, if you will, you know? And it can be very detrimental to compare yourself to, especially with social media now. I mean, it's like, how many times have I gotten on social media and it's like, oh my God, man, this dude is like killing, like he's like slaying, like he's posting like a video or something like every day. And it's like, it looks professional, like he sounds great. He's got like 1 million followers, man, his solos, his chops are insane, like whatever. He's touring, he's playing with this famous band, like all this. It's very easy to compare yourself.
Yeah.
On the opposite end of that, too, it's very easy to see somebody that might not be up to the caliber or level that you're at, too. And it's easy to be like, man, you got some, like, work to do, you know? And it's like, we all have work to do.
Absolutely.
It's best not to compare all the time and just strive to be the best that you can be and do the best that you possibly can do for the gig. So I'll elaborate on everything that y'all just told me, too. Be professional. Be prepared, you know your craft, Dress appropriately. Why do I keep going back to that?
It can be really important.
That's really
Like,
funny.
look fly, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean,
gotta look good.
Use
You
your
gotta look
intuition, man. Like,
Yeah, I think like I was talking to some buddies recently. I feel like it can kind of, it's like the three categories. It's like the chops, you know, it's the hang, and it's the professionalism. And like I feel like you can boil everything down into one of those three categories, and they're all like, in a certain sense, they're all like kind of, for a lot of gigs, like I would say like almost equally important. Like those just those three, like across the board. Like you have to kind of have all of them, you know?
of course, man.
Yeah.
Of course. And I would say too, like as far as maybe from the business aspect, we're also sort of naturally segueing here into an etiquette aspect too. Like that's one of those things too where I feel like any musician, any player, any band leader can always improve. For instance, there's sometimes I'll get like a call for a gig from a band leader, maybe if Sam or Illia calls me for the gig, it's always very professional. It's always like, hey man, what are you doing on Saturday the 13th? Got a gig at so-and-so club from 6 to 9 for $100 plus tips. It's you, Sam, Illia, and John Worf on bass or something. Are you available and down? You know, give you as many give you all of the info that you possibly need, right?
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that, you get some people that are just like, hey man, what you doing on Friday?
It's so real.
It's like that Loki meme. It's like, my answer to that depends entirely on all of the information you're about to give me right now.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. I think I remember seeing like you repost that meme on Instagram.
I think I posted it a few times.
That's so funny. And I think like after seeing you post that, I'm like, okay, when I text Brendan, I'm going to give him everything tiny bit of information I could possibly give him so that he doesn't like, he can just look at it and like, I don't know, like that's it. Like,
Well,
that's
I'll tell you why, man. Like I'm not just wanting to hold everybody else accountable. It's just as much as I'm holding myself accountable, because let me tell you, anybody that's probably watching this that I've worked with has probably known at some point that I have double booked myself because I've said yes to something that maybe I wasn't entirely available for. Which, can can come back to bite you sometimes. Again, that's part of the professional thing too. Like, keep track of your book, keep track of your schedule. Like this is what we are doing. We're very fortunate. If you are a creative for a living, if you're a professional musician for a living, we're having fun. I mean, like this, like you have to have fun. Like that's,
Absolutely.
Especially playing music live in any sorts, even if it's the most like emo, sad songs. I mean, if people are coming out to listen to you, like they're coming out to listen to you and giving you their time, and you're performing what your version of, creativity or art is for them. And that in itself is a truly wonderful thing and truly a privilege. And it's something that we shouldn't take for granted. And therefore, we should all be very professional and take what we do very seriously while being able to have like the absolute time of our lives doing it.
For sure. Absolutely.
Cool. Let's take a quick pause, quick break.
Okay.
Thanks to all those sponsors we mentioned, maybe, depending on how things go in the next 7 days before this is published. That's a stupid joke.
Dude, we got sponsors? That's pretty heavy.
Hopefully.
Dude.
If we can find
If any
some in the next
local
7
business
days.
wants to.
Yeah. Okay. So one question I want to ask you, and we've kind of talked about this already. Like I think this whole podcast is kind of like a great thing to listen to and take advice from as a newer musician, especially like a newer drummer. But if there's like two big pieces of wisdom that you could give like a drummer that wants to be the next Brendan Bull, like what are like two pieces that you might not like? I feel like a lot of this stuff is like, okay, be professional, show up on time, learn songs, be a good hang. But like what are two more sort of pieces of wisdom that took you a long time to figure out that like you really think help you kind of succeed as a drummer?
Never, ever, ever use shampoo in your beard. Conditioner only. immediately comb it out and dry it out, and I use Honest Amish beard oil to hydrate and exfoliate the skin underneath the beard. No, man.
That's hilarious.
I mean, that is pretty...
That's great advice, honestly.
I mean,
No, man. I mean, that's a flattering question, man. I immediately try to think about what it was like, when I was coming up, man. If you want to do... Again, it depends on what it is. I know that we've mentioned this a few times in private and in the podcast. It depends on what you want to do for your career. Do you want to be like the most versatile drummer possible? Do you want to have a huge social media following? Do you want to be a recording drummer? Do you want to just play music on the side and maybe an original band or something? Or do you want to do it all? There's so many variables and there's so many factors. Maybe one of the recurring themes in all of these questions and answers is versatility. You have to be able to be versatile. You have to have a positive attitude. But in all seriousness, you really do have to have a lot of discipline. You have to have the discipline to sit down and hone your craft and be able to legitimately practice your craft and know what you need to do to hone your craft. Always surround yourself with musicians that are better and more experienced than you. I think that is probably one of the biggest things that I could have done almost unknowingly when I was younger. A lot of the bands that I played in, especially in college and after college, they were always stacked with musicians that were way more talented and way more experienced than I was. Find yourself, I think I already said this, find yourself a good teacher, but on top of that, a good mentor. Find yourself somebody that you can idolize, somebody that will inspire you to practice and develop your craft. And that to elaborate on that, I remember going to see shows, going out with my friends to see our favorite bands, when we were younger. And, sometimes other drummers, we'd go hang and, check out the drummer or whatever in our favorite band. And I'll never forget, sometimes people, after the show, some of my buddies would be like, dude, I just want to go home and, throw my sticks in the lake. Or, I want to go home and chunk my guitar in, the river or something. But, because the band was so good or the drummer was so good, or I'll never be able to reach that, level. And I can honestly say, not trying to sound egotistical or narcissistic, but I never had that mentality. I mean, I've always been so passionate about music and loved it so much, and I figured out from an early age that it was something that I wanted to do and that I could do. And then later, as I got older, I figured out what I needed to do it. But I always was like, man, are you kidding? I want to go home right now after the show and just jam out on my drums and learn every song in the world or whatever. I would be so inspired. And so I think being able to allow yourself to be inspired is also very important. And finding a mentor, finding a teacher, finding somebody that you can look up to, more experienced players. What else have I said redundantly now? Yeah, man. I think that's all very important. You also have to be willing. You have to be willing to. You have to be willing to maybe make a few sacrifices. You have to be willing to practice things that are hard. You have to, let's say, for instance, this is something that wigs a lot of drummers out for some reason. If you haven't studied privately or with a teacher or whatever, I know there's some drummers out there that have sort of this weird disdain for rudiments or learning how to read music or sight reading, and I mean that's fine. I get it. But at the same time, I will say that by not learning that language, it's one less thing that you don't know. Even if you never use a particular rudiment, or if you never have to ever play a sight reading gig, it's still something that is going to benefit your mind and benefit your hands and and feet and your body, and it's going to make you a more versatile musician. So again, man, like it's easy for me to sit here and be like, you have to practice, you have to find like a good teacher, you have to have discipline and like all that stuff, but it's like really putting those words into actions is what's really going to help. It's important to have good quality equipment that works for you. I do not have the fanciest drum sets. I don't have the fanciest cymbals. I'm not really much of a gearhead. I would say 95% of my gigs, I play a 4-piece kit with hi-hat, crash, and ride. And, I'm kind of the mentality that if you can't get something done on that, then you can't get it done. Not saying that bigger kits aren't worth it or anything like that. Not to get off on the tech side of things. But I would say just to have like the most positive attitude, be able and willing to work with a variety of people in a lot of different situations, being able to take direction, being able to interpret that direction and making it sound like yourself. Those are all very, very important things. When the studio engineer tells you to play softer, you don't start playing harder.
Yeah.
When the studio engineer wants to swap out a snare drum, you're not like, no, man, like this is the only snare drum that's going to be on this. I don't know, man. Just having a positive attitude, man. Being able to be versatile and be able to work with different people. I probably said that about 5 times now.
Yeah.
That's important, though.
Yeah.
It is. It is.
Hammers at home, for sure. Illia, would you like to close us out?
Yeah. Do we have time for another question, or is that okay? Cool. I just want to make sure. Okay, so I'm gonna reframe this question how I have been asking it. We always like to ask about like local spots, like our guests' favorite spots. If you had like, let's say you got some friends that are in a band that are coming into town, they're gonna play a show. Where would you take them in Columbia? What would you go do with those people from out of town? What would you show them?
Like
here?
after the show or whatever?
Or like if they got like a day to hang out in Columbia, you know what I mean? Like what are you taking them to do?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow. Getting the inside scoop on the hometowns now. Well, one of my favorite hangs like of all time, easily and by far, is Transmission Arcade. My boy Cam Powell runs it, and it was sort of one of his big ideas, and it's right next to the joint, as we know. Place is awesome. I mean, they have like the most killing food. If you love pinball, it's the place for you. They got plenty of games to keep you entertained, and it's just an all-around good hang. Good beer and food selection. It's just a great hang. There's usually always a bunch of really cool people hanging out too, and it's just an all-around good vibe. I also really like Curiosity Coffee. That's a really nice, cool, quiet, chill place. They've had some live music in the past too. And on the opposite side of town, I also really like Drip. Shout out to my boy Roger Kaufman, won Best Barista in the Free Times poll this past year. We also play together too. So Drip is really cool. Papa Jazz Record Shop.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of my friends work there. They have been around forever. I spent probably more time in college in Papa Jazz scouring the jazz section than I did doing my homework or practicing. Actually, that's not true. I probably spent the 2 places that I remember going to in college were the practice rooms and Papa Jazz Record Shop.
Beautiful.
And then too, honestly, you guys been down to the Riverwalk?
Yeah.
The Calgary Riverwalk?
Good spot.
Yeah,
man. I mean, it's not until you go down there and like walk down the river on like the path that it's like under the Gervais Street Bridge and things. Like it's so nice and chill, and it's like, obviously the sound of the water too. I mean, it's just, I would say taking your friends, if they've never been to Columbia before, taking them to the Calgary Riverwalk is probably that will do you so much good, because you're like, wow, we really do live in a beautiful place, and your friends are gonna love it too.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I'm trying to think, man. I'm trying to think where else.
That sounds like a good day to me.
Yeah.
2 coffee shops.
Yeah, exactly. 2 coffee shops, a barcade, and nature.
There we go.
That's all you need in life.
And then you go play the gig.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, I think that wraps it up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brandon, for having us. Very
Thank
much
you.
for being.
For us having you.
Thank you for being here. There we go. Wow.
Hey, it was my pleasure. I love you guys so much. I as you know, I love the Sam and Illia sandwich.
Oh yeah.
I hope we can do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks to Zach for producing the podcast. Thanks to the Jam Room for having us. It's a great place to get some recordings done if you're into that kind of thing. Yeah.
That's
Thank y'all
it.
for
We'll see you
listening.
later.
Thank y'all so much.